All right. So as you probably could see with my lips moving, I was just saying a few things. Let me just check the mic, by the way. I was welcoming you back, and I was thanking you because you hadn't lost trust despite all the sort of recent absences due to technical difficulties, lack of network, traveling, all sorts of things. And we actually still haven't come back to having face-to-face. So today is just, we're just doing it online. Yeah. So I'm being told I'm forgiven, so that's very nice. All right. So we're still studying Abhidharma, and the reason why we're studying Abhidharma is because the place where all suffering universally originates is from not properly seeing the mind, and unfortunately misapprehending the nature of this consciousness. We hold onto the subjective dimension as a self, and the, you could say, objective dimension as other. This is actually how we define duality. And it's the whole struggle around self and other, the experience of consciousness and its content, the misunderstanding of consciousness of its own content that prompts this dualistic perception, which drives suffering. And this is a misconception. This is an error. This is a delusion. This is a not getting it straight. That prompts, as much as that might sound innocent in some way, it actually is what prompts everything we call samsara. It's what prompts the experiences of heaven, of hell, of the entire struggle around our individual existence. So this is material that's worth looking into, and this really is the teaching on wisdom that we have in Buddhism. It's the teaching on understanding reality beyond just appearances. So as we've looked at the Abhidharma, we've looked at the structure of our perceptions in terms of the object, in terms of the perceiving faculty that we possess, and the consciousness that this generates within us. So you could say we've been mapping out the mechanics, or the basics for the mechanics of our experience. And now we're looking at the experiences that arises out of that. So as you might remember, we looked at the 18 dhatus, which comes from this set of 6 in 3 different aspects. 6 meaning the 5 senses and the mind, and then in terms of the object perceived, in terms of the faculty, and in terms of the consciousness generated. So we've looked at that, but it's on the basis of these perceptions that particularly then what we call mind, the 6th consciousness, if you like. Of course, as you know, it's a bit more complex than that, but basically, yes, this mind that is the experience of everything undergoes various experiences, which we call mental factors. And this is what we're looking at now. So in this present chapter, we're looking at the mind and its experiences. And we're starting off with first identifying what takes place when we perceive something. So that's what we're looking at now. We're looking at something that's called the ever-present factors. And so we've looked at We looked at feeling. And let's see here. We've looked at feeling and then perception. And then we're now going to be looking at attraction or rapport. Now, again, do you mind again? Then this comes up because a lot of us have a pretty some of us we very often think that the spiritual path is entirely focused on the intuitive dimension of meditation and very much focused on the outcome of the path, peace. But we actually need to begin with the place where we are, which is not presently, not having arrived at complete enlightenment. We actually have to deal with the reality of our pained existence. The good news is that this reality is something that we can work with, and it's actually in the process of discovering liberation within our familiar in our familiar perceptions that we begin to experience liberation. So the so-called familiar material that we might think is just sort of terribly ordinary, and we'd want nirvana instead, is actually the place where it's the foundation for our discovery of freedom. So it's on the basis of our neurosis and seeing through our neurosis, which is this very pedestrian, ordinary, domestic experience that we have in terms of our not getting what we want, etc. It's on the basis of that, when we're free of that, that we actually begin to understand the logic of liberation. So without relating properly to that, then we don't really, we're really just more dreaming of what might come rather than relating to what is. So hold on. I've recently gone through some rearrangements in terms of technical aspects. And, it's hopefully improved, but also slightly more complex. Okay. So that's where we've looked at what we experience and the various components of our experience. The more we understand the complexity and the compounded nature of what we experience, the more we understand it's not just this one-shot deal that is good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant. And that's where we look at the sensations, which of course, the sensations, the raw sensations, they come in terms of our likes and dislikes, but then we begin to weave stories about them. We classify them, we conceptualize them. That's what we looked at last time. And now we're looking at the relationship between the object that we're perceiving and then ourselves, really, and what that prompts in terms of what we do. And we'll see this is actually what brings about the condition for karma. When we interact with phenomena, with our likes and dislikes, that's then, you could say, further fueled by the narratives of, oh, this is really something fantastic. This is something really lousy. Let's say movies, for example. We might sort of very much appreciate intelligent, great movies, and then sort of just cheap soap operas, we kind of go, oh, that's not interesting, or whatever it might be. So there we have one thing is just seeing the object out there, but then on top of the object, which is really just all the various things that we in terms of it's all the signals, what's it called again? You know, just that we're seeing stuff, right? Pixels, so on. That we just have like and dislike on a very basic level. Then we have this whole sort of, we weave a whole thing about, you know, the artistic dimension behind it and so forth. Especially in the modern world, we are so intellectualized and very proud of it. We're very much into sort of having a, you know, an opinion about things. And that's where then this is what draws us into action. This is when we switch on or switch off. This is when we remember things. This is when we or lesser grade art or, you know, rubbish and so on. So we have a very strong interaction with things, and when we feed this with actual engagement, this is what lays down patterns in terms of our actions. And that once we begin to act on these impulses of like and dislike and the narratives and so on, and the attraction or repulsion and so on, then we're in this engagement, basically, this rapport, or no, not the rapport, but us engaging. This is where we put down patterns of action. And this repeats itself. That's where we begin to construct what we might think is our unique personal style. And of course it is. But this is really just a set of causes and conditions that drive our experience and our perception. And this is then the foundation for what we call karma, in terms of our personal experience and in terms of what that personal experience generates in terms of our perception of a world around us. So this cetana, attraction or directionality, Steven says, the third factor, cetana, is translated variously as attraction or directionality, or as previously discussed, as will or volition. It is the factor that is a full explanation when we understand its dynamics of karma. As discussed before, there is no dharma, no factor called karma. There is the dharma called directionality of mind, as it is rendered in mind in Buddhist psychology. One of the ways mind works is to bend or to move towards its objects. So that's what we do with regards to our engagement with the objects. Yeshe Gyaltsen, who you'll remember is, which I think was he was a tutor of one of the Dalai Lamas and a great scholar in the Gelug tradition. So mind in Buddhist psychology is essentially this professor called Leschly Kawamura, his translation of Yeshe Gyaltsen's work. So it says here, Yeshe Gyaltsen quotes an Abhidharma text by a Sangha, stating, this particular movement of mind is an activity that propels the mind forward. It has as its function making the mind settle on what is either positive or negative or in between. It's a mental event or a factor that arouses or urges awareness toward its object. So this is the cetana is this engagement with the object that propels us into action, and which essentially, as a consequence, lays down patterns. The Abhidharma Kosha, in the very beginning of chapter 4, the chapter on karma, says that karma consists of that factor called directionality, and what follows in its wake, what was directed, cetavicca. We previously discussed this when we explored the Abhidharma understanding of how karma works. Yeah, let's just look up what cetavicca is. It's probably just going to be, let's see here, yeah, sampa. Okay, it's better. Sampa means reflection. So it's basically the mind that we have as we engage with something. Steven then continues, as previously discussed, it is the moving and having been moved. Everything that has been moved as karma can be classed as either bodily or vocal act. So this movement or directionality or intentionality is a moving forward of our awareness, and it's a very important factor. Understanding this one Dharma allows us to fully understand karma. Once again, we're reminded that the details and dynamics of that one factor are given in full treatment in chapter 4 of the Abhidharma Kosha, Karma Nidesha. Okay. So what we're saying here really is that karma is once we engage into action. And one thing is we could think of something that we like or dislike, and that's one thing, and that we might just, if we're meditators, and what we've looked at before, of course, is how shamatha affects how we engage with the object, how actually we're able to not be carried away to the same extent, and simply knowing the nature of the arising thought, not being driven by it. So you could say, once we understand what really is the agenda of this entire work, this dismantling the presumptions behind what Steven refers to as fixity, which is our fixation, our deluded misperception that solidifies our experience and really just thinks of what we are perceiving in terms of just one thing, which we like and dislike, etc. But it's on the basis of having a little bit of space that we begin to, once we understand the lack of solidity, it's on the basis of having some peace and some space in the mind that we could actually have thoughts that arise, impulses that arise, and we don't necessarily act on them. And that's where we begin to disengage this ordinary impulse towards movement. So it's on the basis of understanding what we're discussing here, cetana, and the attraction, directionality, the engagement with the object, that we begin to actually dismantle the web of karma. And it's at this place where we can see how karma is created on the basis essentially of us engaging, being caught up with a particular object. That's where we lay down the patterns, and it's in not falling for that, seeing through that, and actually understanding what it is that's taking place within our mind, that we begin to then free ourselves from the grip of karma. So Steven continues, this factor can also be understood in the sense of attraction, as it's translated in the gateway to knowledge. This translation captures the aspect of the movement of mind, which is attracted towards different ways of being. Of course, attraction here doesn't necessarily mean that we like something, it's more that we sort of move towards it. Of course, Steven says there is quite a difference in English between attraction, will, volition, or directionality. So maybe it's helpful to know that all these different words are attempts to capture some aspect of what is meant by that one factor, cetana. And that's where I would then also add to this already existing sort of a set of synonyms, engagement, that we engage something, we act on something in the sense that we're identifying it and we go towards it with a particular action. So, any questions about this, cetana? This one is quite important. I mean, the thing is, when we're talking about these ever-present factors, they're ever present within every moment of our experience. So we have sort of sensation, we have the conceptualization of what's going on, and then we have this attraction or engagement. Yeah, so that happens. This is happening with us all the time, right now. But seeing the aspects of it, quite helpful in terms of addressing fixity. Okay. Is this cetana, does it have something to do with habits? It's karmic habits that we have this moment and attraction, right? Yeah, that's exactly it. It's actually right now that we're laying down. You could say it's through Chetana that we lay down the karmic habits. Yeah. Yeah. Can you please explain how our lung, this innate impulse, work? Well, that's actually beyond the scope of what this text is speaking about, because there you're, but it is something that you're right. This is connected, and that's where we talk about prana, mind. So here we're really just talking about mind. But of course, when you come into Vajrayana, you come into Vajrayana yoga, then we talk about prana, mind, in the sense that the mind and prana, they're very linked together, right? So it's on the basis of our particular likes and dislikes that we, you could say our physical, our somatic aspect also gets involved. You know, like we like something and we can feel this sort of physical urge, or we dislike something, we feel revulsion and so on. So that has to do with the way that we feel and perceive. And that is then what prompts our further actions. So you could say Lung has a lot to do with this. And it's also, of course, once we then engage, then also the prana is what is, you know, is mixed, is thrown into the mix. But presently, we're really just talking about mind, and we should just understand this in a generic sense. And the lung, or the prana, is then essentially the somatic aspect of this mind. Is this karmic attraction more like lenchak? It could be, yeah. I mean, lenchak, okay, lenchak means karmic debt. So that means that we owe something to somebody. And we might have, on the basis of, if you study the science around karmic debt, then it's true. Then some of the things that we are attracted to might just be that we have a particular karma. Songtse Rinpoche, who famously is very naughty, he was observing how many people must have karmic debt to Louis Vuitton, because these very unattractive, bulky bags, they seem to be selling very well, and there's no logical explanation why anybody would want Louis Vuitton bags, except it must be lenchak, it must be karma. So that's where we could say impulse and the notion of attraction, you could say further back, happens due to previously imprinted patterns, yeah? But then again, presently we're discussing this more in terms of the seeds that we're laying down, rather than it's more about what comes next rather than what has brought us here. Likes and dislikes arises after Chetana? No. This is more actually what happens at the level of Vedana, sensation, and also samnya, or samjhana, which is perception. But they're consolidated. They're then consolidated and solidified through Chetana. Like there is a movement toward the object first, and then like dislike arises, aversion, attachment. Yeah, it's rather the movement. The movement is prompted by the likes and dislikes. So I think we switch it around. First you have the like and the dislike, and that is what drives the movement. I notice that when I sit to meditate, my mind tends to fall into the habit pattern of going through my to-do list. My sitting now becomes a planning session of sorts. I want to break this habit. I guess it's the Chetana aspect of my mind movement towards this to-do list. So how do I break it? Very good. This is exactly what we want to do with this study. Because this is when we begin to have these patterns that we begin to have some handle on what actually is taking place. There's this notion of possibly needing this urgency, and this is fueled by a desire towards what's going to be helpful for us. And as such, we feel justified. Maybe we want to meditate. We thought we would meditate, but then we think, oh no, I should really go over my, list of things to do. And that's where we have this impulse from before, something that's important. We have chosen to do it. It's the right thing. And then we actually sit and engage in actions, which is then must do this, must do that, must do this, etc. So it's true. And that happens, and it's really on the basis of us studying and being aware of what's going on in our mind that we begin to simply see this is the kind of games that our mind is playing. These are the mechanics, the functioning of the mind. Now, how we break it, well, that's through the practice of shamatha. This is where we then, having understood the destructive nature of this or the futility of this, and particularly understanding that there's a time for these things. And of course, we have a to-do list. It's obvious that we're going to have to do these things, but not while we're sitting down and meditating. There has to be a reason for why we're meditating, which overrides then the other impulses. So that's where you say, okay, when I'm meditating, then I might have impulse towards doing, to-do list, but then I also realize the value of meditation, and as such, I engage with the actual meditation technique. The meditation technique, of course, is to not be distracted by the thoughts and to direct attention elsewhere, namely to the object of mindfulness. So you can choose, you can have the to-do list here, you can have the mindfulness here, but the beauty of meditation is that you're not really struggling. You're just shifting the attention from the fascination with the to-do list to the object of mindfulness. So the to-do list is welcome to be there, but you're just not going to focus on it. So that's where, just like we focus on something that we're, even though there's lots going on, we can focus on something, we focus on a person we're talking with, even though there's a lot of traffic around us. So we have the capacity to focus, and we're not victims of whatever arises in the mind. But that is particularly what this skill is something that we train in when we practice meditation. So that's how we break it. You're going to have to stick around for the meditation session for the details. So, sparsha, contact, jekpa. So the fourth factor, sparsha, is translated as contact and rapport. Sorry, I mistakenly was referring to cetana as rapport, but this is actually what's taking place when we engage with an object. Then we are, you can say, involved with the object. This is part of the 12-fold chain of dependent co-arising. Contact means something coming together. So actually, if you look at the 12, I forget which one, this one is, I think maybe 6, but I'm not sure. Anyway, in terms of the 12 links of dependent arising, then this coming together of perceptions, perception of object and subject and object is what we call contact. So contact means something coming together. Yeah? I touch something. Yeah, I can feel something, hear something, taste something. While the term contact is used in gateway to knowledge, rapport is used in the translation found in mind in Buddhist psychology. Rapport means that something is working together in a good way. Whether you say contact or rapport, both mean that there is a coming together, the meeting or the working together of three aspects. You'll be happy to know that these three aspects, so they're familiar with us. We're not gonna, how do you say, expose you to new three aspects. They're the good old familiar, the object, the faculty, and the consciousness that ensues. But of course, what are they referred to as? Capacity, the field, and the integrational function. Yeah. So you have the eye, you have the object of the eye, which is a form, and then on the basis of that, you, a living person with consciousness, not just a machine, but you, a living person, have a particular visual perception. So he says already, Steven says, already our data analysis helps us a bit. It's coming together of column 1, sensory capacity or faculty, indriya, together with column 2, the sensory field, alambana, and also column 3, the perception consciousness or integrative capacity, vijnana. When there is rapport or contact, it supports the arising of a full experience. If there's any damage or defect in the rapport, there will not be an experience. So in the absence of, let's say, the eye, we don't perceive forms, right? And even though we have eyes, if there's nothing that's the object of the eye, then we're also not going to have a visual perception. And if we're lacking consciousness, then also we're not going to have any visual perception. So these three coming together is what essentially constitutes the experience. So we then have 5, attention, the manasikara, which is sometimes translated as attention. What does attention mean? It is a process regarding how the mind works. It fixates on an object of concern. So we go through these exercises in terms of our engagement and contacting, and we then hold on to that. This is how we engage with objects. There's a process in which then it gets our full attention. Can we just stay with these objects? Steven asked. Mind in Buddhist psychology says that this is a factor in which there is a continuity, of being able to hold the mind on its object or its reference point. Okay, this is where we looked at this in terms of the channels earlier on, and also identified how this applies when we're meditating. Of course, when we are unconscious, then we're simply just absorbed by objects. But when we're meditating, we're also sustaining a continuity. And that's where we have this capacity to sustain at will an attention. So when we're meditating, this is then on something that is not in the realm of, you say, mindless absorption in any object, but rather is the presence of mind in which we could possibly sustain focus that is unclouded on the basis of an object of mindfulness, like the breath. So Steven then says, what is the difference between directedness, cetana, and attention, manasikara? Yeah, both are ways of going towards an object. Both are movements, but what is the difference? The answer given is that directionality is a general movement of the mind, bringing the mind toward its object. We move toward an object. We do not have a specific object in focus yet, but we're just moving towards it. Attention, however, is having the mind fixed on a particular object. So we might move towards a particular phenomenon, we're just, you could say, drawn in, but it's on the basis of the manasikara that we actually develop a full actual appreciation for the object that we then hold on to. He says here we have a given sense of the meaning of the 5 basic factors. Even though they are very important factors involved in our experience, to date, there is no uniformity of agreement on how to translate these factors. Well, I would say as end users, I wouldn't worry too much about that. This is really just to give a sense of what goes on in terms of the dynamics in any given situation. So it's more about us actually looking at our experience. Translators, they can grapple with the fine-tuning of the language. But I would always say, if you're an end user and you're not a translator, don't bother. Just try to get the sense, I would say, just try to get the sense of what it actually means in terms of our experience. Then the language, I don't know, some people seem to be very sort of picky about the language, but honestly, it's just about really identifying what's happening with us and our habitual patterns and what's the way out. That's really what matters. So the sort of the bickering around the particular, as you can hear, as someone who does dabble in translation, I'm sort of a little bit wary of the dangers of overly being concerned about translation. And so, so yes, but you see, really anything, when you translate anything, it doesn't matter if it's from Tibetan to English or from French to English, there's no end to the discussions about language. So, yes, there's certainly no uniformity or agreement on how to translate these factors. In this case, just as there is in many other contexts. All right. Object-determined factors. Okay. These are, I'll bring them up here. Okay, we have again a set of 5. Intention, interest, recollection, concentration, and discrimination. So Steven says about the first, intention. The first object-determined factor, chanda, is translated as intention. In Gateway to Knowledge, so it's translated as intention, gateway to knowledge, and interest in mind and Buddhist psychology. Interest is the desire to endow a thing with this or that particular attribute. It's an awareness that gets a bit more involved in the object. It has the function of laying a foundation for actually developing a sense of enthusiasm regarding the object of focus. It seems that if we're not a bit involved with a subject, it's a bit hard to develop enthusiasm regarding it, right? This factor is translated in Gateway to Knowledge as intention, in the sense of trying to possess a desired object. It supports the application of exertion. So this is also something that, this of course drives the way that we then further engage with objects and seek to repeat objects, seek to repeat experiences. But this is also what we use in the sense of meditation. So it's on the basis of us wishing to sustain a particular object, a particular degree of attention, then that we engage really on the basis of having an objective with the particular object. Okay, interest, intensified interest. Factor 2, adimoksha, or adimukti, is translated in Gateway to Knowledge as interest. Steven says, remember that mindfulness in Buddhist psychology translated chanda as interest. And they translate this factor here as adimoksha, as intensified interest. Being able to stay focused on the object. We get interested or involved in something, which is chanda, And that serves as a basis for developing enthusiasm. And adimoksha is an intensification of that interest. These are not random lists. In many cases, they are developmental processes. For example, here, there is a sense of how we first get involved in and then can stay with an object of awareness. This also is something that applies when we're meditating. As you know, perhaps there's what we call the nine ways of shamatha. And these are essentially the increased ability to stay with non-distraction until actually we're free of distraction altogether and essentially master the mind. But this, of course, is something that we have in any given involvement with something that is that we turn into the object of our awareness. Yeah. So Steven continued, it is the way of the Abhidharma to have lists that have an order and a purpose. What we're seeing here is how we develop the capacity to stay with any object or focus whatsoever. If there's a defect in any of these, if some of these factors are not fully present, then the chosen object of our awareness will not be vivid or clear. So this is like when we're intending to focus on something, but then we sort of drift, and then we have a corresponding weak perception of this particular object. The definition of this intensified interest, according to mind and Buddhist psychology, is to be able to stick with the thing that has been determined. Its function is so that you cannot be taken away from it. You're not so easily distracted. We might say that the relationship between chanda and adimoksha is this. We get a bit involved in something, and this serves as a basis for developing an enthusiastic interest. But unless we can intensify this being involved, it's easy to get distracted. So this is, I think, something that's pretty common in our experience, yeah? That unless we really stay focused, then also we have not the same degree of a clear experience of the object. Essentially just being distracted, yeah? So we might want to, we might want to study Abhidharma. But then there's a Euro Cup, Denmark against England. And then it's difficult to stay focused. Stuff like that. Okay, recollection or inspection. Smriti. Now this is mindfulness. So smriti or Jemba in Tibetan. There are many translations for factor 3, smriti. Recollection, inspection, sati, as we have it in Jemba or in Satipatthana, the Satipatthana Sutta, which is really the quintessential meditation instruction in the Theravadan tradition, with the 4 kinds of discussing the 4 kinds of mindfulness. So this key factor, smriti, and mindfulness, has been translated in Gateway to Knowledge as recollection, and in mind in Buddhist psychology as inspection. It names the capacity to stay with an object of focus so that one does not become distracted. Whatever the focus of the mind is, it doesn't slip away. It doesn't forget or go away from whatever it focuses on. It can stay with that object of awareness. What is it again? In Tibetan, they say Yulla Korwa. Korwa, that young Korwa, I think. It means for the mind to come back to its object. It means to, you could say, essentially hover around its particular object. Now remember, the mind consists of, as we looked in the Data analysis, the mind that has a particular perception is actually instant, it's moments, just short instances. So it's almost as if when we're mindful, it's like we're handing over the baton to the next moment. So we're mindful here, but then we are handing on that quality of focus on the object to the next moment, and that hands on to the next moment. And it's us actually continually coming back to that direction, that determination to not let it slip away. This is what we then call mindfulness, and that is the quality of being fully present. Otherwise, the opposite of that is mindlessness. So this quality of mindfulness is where we essentially sustain attention. Steven goes on to say, remember that this factor of mindfulness is one of the two major factors which are cultivated in shamatha meditation. We previously spoke of a monk chasing an elephant, his out of control mind, with a noose, a symbol for being mindful. Okay? So he has a noose or a lasso. Then he has this terrible thing called the, what is it, ankusha. This, it's like a hook. It's this terrible thing that mahouts, you know, these guys that drive elephants, you know, elephant drivers, you know, your local elephant driver. Well, he has this thing that he just needs to hold it down over the eye of just the elephant sees this. It's terrified because presumably the mahout, when nobody's looking, probably, you know, beats this poor elephant into submission. So when the elephant just sees this ankusha, this hook, then it right away sort of snaps to attention. And that's what this symbolizes the awareness of the mind. So simply just through awareness of the condition of the mind, we apply then that which actually pulls the elephant or guides the elephant, which is then the noose or the lasso. Yeah, this doesn't mean that the Buddhist masters, they endorsed the practice of mahouts, but just that this is something that obviously would have been fairly familiar in terms of controlling this large animal that then is the metaphor for the mind, for the powerful mind, which then in its distracted state goes on a rampage and causes distraction. And that's where we then, on the basis of mindfulness, we then control it. What is it Shalinobu Rinpoche says? He's using a different metaphor. He says the grandfather of mindfulness must watch the spoiled brat of my mind to prevent it from disaster. So mindfulness, and then Steven continues. Remember that this factor of mindfulness is one of the two major factors which are cultivated in mindfulness meditation. Oh yeah, sorry. So we previously spoke of a monk chasing an elephant, his out of control mind with a noose, a symbol for being mindful. In time, that monk will tether that elephant, thereby taming him, by which he will have calmed his own mind. The Buddha often used this analogy of anchoring the mind with the tether of inspection or mindfulness. Again, here we have these terms that are sometimes translated in various ways, you know? But hopefully we can align what's being described here with our actual experience. Okay. Let's see if there's questions. Yeah, the goad, that's right. Yeah, that's probably what we would. Yeah, ankusha is, I think, goad. Yeah, that's the right word. Yeah. The function of inspection here is that we won't be so easily distracted. A good calm abiding meditator can stay with whatever channel they have chosen to focus on. They won't just have one moment of seeing, channel 1, and then lots of moments of being absorbed by other channels. They can stay with the chosen object. So channel 1 refers to seeing. So for example, if we have an object, external object that we're focusing on, a Buddha statue, flower, or whatever, then the person who practices mindfulness is mindful of the object and then without the mind, then in the next moment going to other places, the meditator then is aware of this in the next moment, and the next moment, and the next moment. And that's where the meditator is not concerned about some particular experience that's supposed to happen. The meditator quite simply just is aware of the flower, aware of the flower, aware of the flower. And actually, in pursuing this practice of mindfulness, there's peace that arises in the mind. Now, if the meditator sat there waiting for, I want to have this experience, or I want to have peace of mind, that's just thoughts that are thinking in terms of there is something I don't have that I want. And as such, essentially consolidating and perpetuating a sense of poverty. There is something I want and I don't have it. And then in case there is some state of mind that's calm, then holding on to this calm state of mind, almost panicky. That's where this has nothing to do with meditation. The practice of mindfulness is this beautiful simplicity that lies in sustaining attention on an object, moment after moment. And it's not as if that sort of whole, you could say, continuity of mindfulness is intended to bring us into a particular state, but it's because this continuity establishes a simplicity in the mind, not a dumb simplicity, but a simplicity in which the ordinary affliction and agitation and turmoil of the confused mind is brought to peace, and the mind's natural intelligence and natural clarity that engages perception of not just, you could say, the mind, but also objects increases. So for the meditator who then emerges from such meditation, then there's a heightened degree of engagement with the phenomenal world. So that's where Steven then says such meditators can stay with the chosen object, the chosen channel, moment after moment. They will not be distracted. The name for that capacity to stay with an object is inspection, or more commonly mindfulness. This is the primary way in which this factor is known. Buddhist practitioners are trying to be sufficiently calm to be able to mindfully stay focused on the object they choose without being distracted. So to do this, to engage in such practice of mindfulness, then it's very helpful to have a corresponding lifestyle or a corresponding mood or a corresponding atmosphere, which is why Buddhist meditators might create particular environments. They might adopt a particular lifestyle that's conducive to this kind of mindfulness. Okay. Yes, pick a channel and stay with it. No zapping. Yeah. That's the idea. All right, any questions in this regard? What is driving the innate impulse to movement in the mind? Is it hope and fear? Yeah, that's right. There's the mind's natural quality is to manifest. We don't just have a dead mind. It's the mind actually is capable of everything. Everything can arise in the mind. Now the entire the entire alienation between self and other, and how we develop then our, you could say, policies and reactions and way of engaging the object is actually what, of course, we're describing here, and it was also what we significantly describe in terms of the 5 skandhas. So if you want to have a very good place of explanation around this whole interaction with our phenomena, which of course runs as a red thread through this whole discussion, but it's very well summed up in the, you can say, the science of the 5 skandhas. Then read a chapter from Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism called The Development of Ego. And that actually, you could say, gives the whole genealogy from, you could say, the primordial ground of being, this great open dimension, before we have samsara and nirvana, and then how we develop samsara. And on the basis of understanding that also, we have some idea of how to free us from this particular cycle. Such a good chapter. How development of ego in Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. This is of course also described elsewhere, but I always think that's a particular useful description. Okay. So as usual, we'll just take a 2-minute break, and then I'm going to present some more about mindfulness and how this is then applied, how we apply this in the practice of meditation, and how essentially we practically engage mindfulness, shamatha, and what that actually means in terms of us having a wider perspective. And yeah, well, freeing us from this cycle of confusion. Okay. Okay. See you later. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be free. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to thee, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish evermore and more. Okay, we'll just have a 2-minute break, and then we'll talk a little bit about meditation, and then after that we'll do some meditation. Okay. So with the practice of meditation, what we really mean to do in the Buddhist path is eliminate some confusion and allow an innate disposition which is not confused to manifest. So we talk about two qualities of the path. One is elimination and one is realization. So what we eliminate with the path is some misunderstanding. And with that elimination of our confusion or misunderstanding, the abiding innate goodness becomes manifest. And this is really important, particularly for modern people who very often are brought to believe that the basic fabric of everyone is selfishness, that everybody basically is just selfish and mean and so on. Selfish gene, right? And that's where it's so important, really, the message that we have from the Buddha, that the abiding, the unconditional ground of every sentient being is free from this confused condition that essentially comes from a cognitive dysfunctioning where we are misapprehending consciousness, the clarity of consciousness for being self and the object, the display as being other. So this duality is what drives this confused condition. And with the practice of meditation, we're essentially allowing this confusion to dissipate. Now, we do this on the basis of being a little bit critical of some of our assumptions. So you do have Buddhist, what we call philosophy, which is not really philosophy, but it's more just critique. It's analysis that takes apart our assumptions. And that's where we've been looking at before in the Abhidharma study, this fixity that we attribute to our experience as being us and object, and this being something very solid. We begin to see it's actually constructed of a sort of a wide variety of conditions that depend on each other. And there's not a single good and bad, a single pleasant and unpleasant. So more that we look at reality, the less we are caught by it. And that's why in the Buddhist teaching, yes, there's a component of theory, which is essentially just to see through delusion. We have the famous image of us misapprehending a rope as a snake. And this snake will not go away on the basis of us supplicating for mercy, or you could say striking up a deal with the snake, negotiating with the snake. Simply just looking and seeing, we see what there is. There's not a snake there. It's just us who are misinterpreting what was there. So that's essentially why we cultivate in Buddhism what we call prajna, which is wisdom that sees through this deception. And this is not just about us ending up with nothing. This is actually opening up. This is what we call, you could say, opening the third eye, if you like. This is, which is really just not being confused and rather being stuck with very limited, confined vision. It opens up for a greater vision, which is then what we call vipassana, wisdom. So the way that we do this is, like I was saying, we have this study that sort of dismantles some of our assumptions. And on the basis of that, we then see where it is that we go wrong. And we've been looking particular on the way that we engage mindlessly in our fixation on particular objects. And we're essentially distracted by thoughts that essentially take us hither and thither and to no end. And so what we are practicing with meditation is to stay present without perpetuating these narratives, these ruminations, these regurgitations of our ordinary thoughts. And we do this by sustaining what was explained earlier, sustaining mindfulness. And mindfulness is the simplicity of remaining undistracted, and it's very helpful for us to have an object on which we remain undistracted. Some of the higher teachings that we have in Buddhism, and particularly in the Vajrayana tradition, such as Mahamudra and Dzogchen, will sometimes talk about simply just leaving the mind in its natural state. But that can be very tricky, because we might actually, while we're meditating, we're actually just sitting there thinking, I wonder if this is the natural state. So it becomes very conceptual, and we never really find peace. Whereas if we sustain mindfulness, which is by definition not conceptual, but has a reference point, such as the breath, such as an object, or even as a visualization of, say, the Buddha, or the one's teacher, or deity, or whatever it might be. Of course, deity in the Buddhist context is not some god, but deity in the Buddhist context is the pure nature of our abiding innate disposition or Buddha nature. But sustaining mindfulness on an object prevents us from falling into conceptuality, and it enables this simplicity of clarity, which then gives us confidence in just the abiding reality of the mind, where so often we are simply just confused by all the stuff and agitation that the turbulent mind churns out, all the projections that happen in the mind. And so sustaining mindfulness is a remedy where, despite whatever might arise in the mind, we're not worried, we're unconcerned by what arises in the mind, through sustaining this quality of just being fully present without necessarily engaging in any particular narrative or any particular train of reflection or reactions to whatever arises in the mind. So for us to engage in the Buddhist path, it's really important that we have a grip on this practice of meditation, because there's a lot of teachings in Buddhism that tells us a lot of wise things, how to be better persons in terms of our behavior and our attitudes and so on. But if we don't have this lubricant of, it's very often just that we have the sort of inner war or inner conflict between what we ought to do and what we want to do. And that's where, once we have mindfulness and the space of simplicity, then the impulses that arise don't have the same grip on us. They arise in space rather than as something that holds us. So being able to see the arising of the impulses, we're able to just observe them and not necessarily be controlled by them. We're not necessarily victims of what arises in our psychology. This is essential if we want to work constructively with the dismantling of our confusion. We need to have this foundation of shamatha, this foundation of calm in the mind. So effectively, how we do this is, there are many different methods in the various Buddhist traditions, but it is essentially of sustaining a presence of mind one moment after the other, without being distracted. The trick, of course, is to not do this rigidly, to not sort of have to hold on to the mind, but to do this in a relaxed way. Otherwise, the mind again becomes nervous and reacts and so forth. So we need to bring to the practice of mindfulness a certain gentleness, but at the same time also a determination to sustain this continuity. So we want to, we essentially, with the practice of sitting meditation, we give the mind the best conditions for this. So of course, we ideally could have sort of particular circumstances in terms of our physical environment and so on. But the main thing really is that it's the mind that's not distracted. So we provide the circumstances as best we can, and certainly the circumstance of keeping the body still is very helpful. And we have then a particular posture that we engage in. We call it the sevenfold posture of Varachana, which essentially is providing a condition in which the mind, or rather the body, is the best it possibly could be. So we sit straight, either on the floor or on a chair, with the spine straight, and also we take our shoulders a little bit back, the chin a little bit in. We lower the gaze, we relax the jaw. We have hands on the knees or in the lap, and this we then we keep as the physical structure. This, we don't need to keep this very rigid, but it's really just that we connect with our physical body, that we're actually present in our physical body. We're not about to leave the body or go somewhere else. It's really just that we connect with the physical. And we sit quietly, but not rigidly, simply just fully embracing our physicality, embracing the fact that we have a body. This is an essential part of who we are. We should be very grateful that we have a body. So celebrating or acknowledging and wholeheartedly then embracing our physicality, we then sit. So we can sit like the Buddha. And then the second aspect has to do with the mind, and then actually this thing that we call mindfulness, smriti or jemba in Tibetan. And we do this by way of having an object. And again, like I said, it's very helpful to have an object because that cuts through the conceptuality of the mind. We truly have cut through conceptuality altogether. Yes, then we don't need a reference point, but if we still have some degree in which psychological material has a grip on us, then clearly it's essential that we have something that enables us to generate this simplicity, which is where we need an object. So we have the object of reference, then here in this case, as our breath. And again, what really reflects this relaxed style of doing it is not that we rigidly hold on to awareness of the breath, but we just hold on to it part of the time. We're aware of the out-breath as it exits from our nostrils. It engages with space. Then we just relax and let the in-breath happen by itself. And again, we're attentive to the out-breath as it goes out. That is our reference point. As we're meditating, this is what we're doing. We are not generating particular states of mind. Repeat, with meditation, we are not generating particular states of mind. Of course, initially we could say we generate the attitude of bodhicitta, which is the enlightened attitude that wishes to establish all beings at the level of enlightenment. We might begin the practice with devotion to our teacher, and we might cultivate that kind of attitude. That's fine. But when we're meditating, then we're simply just sustaining awareness and mindfulness with mindfulness on an object without distraction. So this has nothing to do with thinking. This has, we could even say it has nothing to do with the mind, but of course we do sustain this quality of attention because the mind is always looking for an object. And so directing our attention on the breath, on the out-breath, enables us to use this habit that we have of seeking a focus to replace this on the out-breath. So as we're sitting, we are aware of the out-breath, then we relax, the in-breath happens, and again, we're aware of the out-breath, and the in-breath happens. I know many of you have all sorts of methods, And I repeat this. I have probably done something like, I don't know, anywhere between 500 and 1,000 of these sessions. That's well over. A few years ago, I counted 500. And so it's been several times a week for some 13 years, probably up towards 1,000 of these talks. And I say the same time every time. And yet I know people out there doing all sorts of their own version of meditation. But I hope that at one point there will be sort of a, oh yes, that's what this guy is always going on about. And of course, I don't have it from just, it's not something I made up. This really comes from one of the principal teachers of meditation in the modern world, Jakob. And this also essentially corresponds to everything that you find in the Pith instructions from the Mahamudra and Dzogchen traditions. But at the same time, it's not called Dzogchen, it's not called Mahamudra. It's just simply mindfulness. It's simply shamatha vipassana. And it is simply just the method for us arriving at an actual experience of simplicity. And it's within this experience of simplicity that the mind becomes joyful, becomes less stressed, that we no longer have issues around our, you could say, person, our psychology, etc., where we discover within ourselves a core of simplicity. And to attempt all sorts of fancy Buddhist methods without this foundation, unfortunately, seems not always to work. There are some, you could say, ameliorating factors, devotion, strong compassion, and so forth, that could help. But without actually having a mind that's not controlled by its thoughts, very difficult to have peace of mind. So this practice of continually coming back just to the simplicity of the breath, sustaining this, being aware that we are distracted, and then once we're aware that we're distracted, without any drama, just coming back to the breath, is the foundation of meditation. So in this way, the two aspects of doing when we're meditating is to sit, and the other is to be aware of the out-breath. The last aspect of this method, which has not so much to do with doing, but rather non-doing, if you like, that is to not be carried away by the thoughts. And that's where the thoughts, we don't engage with them. So that means also we don't struggle with them. We don't think, oh, I wish I didn't have this thought, or I'd like to have this kind of mental experience, and so on. We allow whatever arises in the mind to be there without necessarily having likes or dislikes. We're just aware of it. We're just aware of what happens, just like clouds that arise in the sky. The sky doesn't care whether they are black storm clouds or nice little white summer clouds. The very pattern of reacting to the thoughts is really what drives this duality, this subject and object confusion. So to sustain this awareness in which the arising of the thoughts are known, but not something that we react to, is really what enables us to have a wider perspective with regards to the experience of our own mind. It's where we begin to discover some autonomy, where we begin to have confidence in the freedom from the ordinary thoughts and impulses. And it's what enables us to break out of this self-imposed limited shell, really, of our fixation and self-absorption. And it's on the basis of that that naturally there's a greater awareness of the world around us. There's a greater awareness of the other. And there's also a greater confidence and discovery of natural abiding qualities that are innate to us. So these really are the basics of meditation as we're sitting. But yes, we could preface such meditation with something that sets a greater, you could say, an ambiance of greatness, and that is where sometimes we read scriptures, sometimes we engage in yoga, and particularly we here engage in the yoga of recollecting engaging the memory of the Buddha. So with this recollection of the Buddha, there's something that takes place which penetrates or goes beyond the ordinary conceptual mind. And that's touching a deep core of truth within ourselves, a deep core of reality, something, a sense of coming home. When we think of someone who is great and we're touched by it, it goes beyond the ordinary mind and touches a deep core within ourselves, which this process we call blessing. So on the basis of our respect, humility, and genuine appreciation, what we could call devotion, then this experience of blessing can take place. That is why we precede meditation with the practice of the Buddha practice. That's called the treasury of blessings. So we precede the practice of meditation with that. Because we're online today, we're just going to have a session of 15 minutes. So we're going to chant let's do 20 minutes. We'll do 20 minutes of sitting. So we first chant the liturgy, which is a very beautiful devotional liturgy written by a great sage called Jakob. And then we sit. So that's the program. There's still a few minutes left. So normally, let's just see if there's any questions. I have a physical restriction with my leg, which I've never had previously. It's been challenging to let go of sitting on the floor, so to now sitting on a chair. Are there any things to remember about sitting in a chair in meditation? No, it's fine. You know, the Buddha Maitreya, we very often portray as sitting on a chair. Well, of course, we represent it as a throne, but essentially sitting like that. There's no problem. Do you have any pointers on practicing when tired? I notice that the time goes very quickly in early morning sits. There is less alertness. Yeah, when we are tired, when we're a little bit dull, we could have more light in the room. This is helpful these days. You can open the window, have it a little bit more chilly. And also we would say sometimes when we're sort of drooping off, then to just look up. But I would say probably the most helpful thing, if it's very early in the morning, is simply just to open the window or go into a room where it's okay to open the window. Then there will be more alert. Okay, we'll take it to 1 minute break. Then we'll begin. Thank you. Buddha Sakyamuni, yeah. In the Samadhi Sutra, it said those who, while walking, sitting, standing, or sleeping, recollect the moonlight Buddha will always be in the Buddha's presence and will attain vast nirvana. And his pure body is the color of gold, beautiful is the protector of the world. Whoever visualizes him like this practices the meditation of the Bodhisattvas. In keeping with this, we should practice remembering our incomparable teacher, the Lord of Sages, in the following way. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. May all sentient beings enjoy happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the sacred happiness devoid of suffering. And may they dwell in boundless equanimity that is free from attachment and aversion. As the union of unborn emptiness and the ceaseless appearances of interdependence. Magically there appears before me in the sky, amidst the vast clouds of offerings, on a jewel lion throne and lotus sun and moon disk seats, the incomparable teacher, lion of the Shakyas. His body the color of gold, adorned with major and minor marks. Clad in the 3 Dharma robes, he sits in Vajra posture. His right hand gracefully poised in the earth-touching mudra, and his left hand in the gesture of meditation, holding an alms bowl full of nectar. Like a mountain of gold, magnificent he shines in splendor, spreading beams of wisdom light across the whole expanse of space. The 8 close suns, 16 elders and the like, a vast ocean-like retinue of noble beings, encircles him all around. Simply think of him and he grants the glory of the highest bliss, liberation from samsara and nirvana, the 2 extremes. He is the great being, perfect embodiment of every source of refuge. With your great compassion, you embraced this turbulent and degenerate world and made 500 mighty aspirations. You are as exalted as the white lotus. Whoever hears your name shall never return to samsara. Most compassionate teacher, to you I pay homage. All my own and others' virtues of body, speech, and mind, together with all our possessions, visualized like Samantabhadra's offering clouds, I offer to you. All the harmful actions and transgressions I have committed throughout beginningless time, each and every one I now confess with intense and heartfelt regret. In all virtuous actions of the noble ones and ordinary beings accumulated throughout the past, present, and future, I rejoice. Turn the wheel of the profound and vast Dharma teachings ceaselessly and in every direction, I pray. Your wisdom body is like space and remains changeless throughout past, present, and future. Yet in the perception of those to be guided, you go through the display of birth and death. Even so, let your form body continue always to appear. Through all the virtues I have accumulated in the past, am accumulating now, and will accumulate in the future, for the sake of benefiting all beings who are as infinite as space. May you, the sovereign of Dharma, be forever pleased, and may all attain the state of the victorious one, the Lord of Dharma. Living beings like us, adrift in this degenerate age, have no guidance nor protection. Because of your kindness caring for us with surpassing compassion, every manifestation in this world now of the 3 jewels is your enlightened activity. You are then our only refuge, incomparable, supreme. So from our hearts we pray with total confidence and faith. Do not neglect the great promises you made in times gone by, but hold us until we attain enlightenment with your compassion. Supreme Teacher, Bhagavan Tathagata Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Supreme Teacher, Bhagavan Tathagata Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Supreme Teacher Bhagavan Tathagata Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Deyada Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. 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 Om 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 Mani Muni Mahamunaya Soha. From the Buddha's body there emanates a great radiance, a multicolored rays of wisdom light, dispelling all our own and others' obscurations, and causing all the genuine qualities of the Mahayana path to rise within us, so that we attain the level of perfection from which we will never return again to samsara. The miraculous display of the unsurpassable wisdom appears as the intentions, deeds, prayers, knowledge, love, and ability of all the Sugatas and their children. May all beings become exactly like them. I prostrate to all the Buddhas and to the Bodhisattvas endowed with the divine eye of the sages, and to the Shravakas as well. I prostrate to Bodhicitta, which counteracts birth in all lower realms, perfectly shows the path to the higher realms, and leads to no aging nor death. Whatever negative actions I have done under the influence of an afflicted mind, in the presence of the Buddhas, I fully acknowledge them all. By the accumulation of any merit I have created through the three kinds of activities, may my seed of omniscience grow, and may I attain awakening that never ends. Whatever offerings to the Buddhas that can be found in realms of the 10 directions are known to the Buddhas who rejoice in them. I rejoice in all these offerings. I fully acknowledge all negative actions and rejoice in all merit. I prostrate to all the Buddhas. May I attain supreme primordial wisdom. I earnestly request the Bodhisattvas who reside on the 10 levels in all the direction of the worlds and the 10 directions to awaken into supreme enlightenment. Once you have awakened into genuine enlightenment and tamed the Maras and their hordes, may you turn the wheel of Dharma so that all living beings may be healed. With the sound of the great Dharma drum, may you free all sentient beings who are suffering. Throughout inconceivable millions of kalpas, may you remain and teach the Dharma. Mired in the swamp of desire, entangled in the strands of cyclic existence, I am fettered by all that binds. I supplicate those supreme among humans to look upon me. The Buddhas do not blame sentient beings who are flawed. With a loving heart for all sentient beings, may the Buddhas free them from the ocean of cyclic existence. Any perfect Buddhas who are present, those who have passed away, and those yet to come, may I train following in their way and engage in enlightened conduct. Having perfected the 6 paramitas, may I liberate the 6 families of sentient beings. Having actualized the 6 extraordinary faculties, may I reach unexcelled enlightenment. Future phenomena are not born, and those past will not occur. Present phenomena have no inherent nature. There is no actual location. There is no perception. There are no outer things. May I realize the Dhammadhatu of emptiness. According to the Buddhas, the great sages, there are no truly existent sentient beings, no life force. There is no truly existent individual and no nurturing of a self. May I realize the Dhammadhatu where the self is not present. An entity such as grasping onto a self in mind is not present within any of the paramitas. To benefit all sentient beings, may I give with generosity, free of avarice. Since things do not exist as entities, may my wealth appear spontaneously. Since all things totally disintegrate, may I perfect the paramita of generosity. Endowed with the flawless ethics that is guided by rules, and an ethics that is completely pure. With an ethics free of an arrogant mind, may I perfect the paramita of ethics. Just as the elements of earth, water, fire, and wind, bodhisattvas do not remain caught by mental constructs. By attaining patience, anger never arises. May I perfect the paramita of patience. Through the power of previous perseverance, having become stable, enthusiastic, and free of laziness, and through a strong body and mind, may I perfect the paramita of perseverance. Through the samadhi where all is illusion-like, through the samadhi of the hero's stride, and through the samadhi that is like Abhidharma, may I perfect the paramita of meditative concentration. Through actualizing the 3 gates of full liberation, the equal nature of the 3 times, and the 3 types of knowing as well, may I perfect the paramita of prajna. Through persevering in a bodhisattva's practice, may I attain the kaya praised by all the Buddhas, the luminous kaya and the kaya blazing with majesty. Thus may my intention be fulfilled. May I be like the famed Maitreya who engaged in such a practice, perfected the paramitas, and perfectly abides at the zenith of the 10th level. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be freed. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. May the Buddha appear in this world, may the light of the teachings shine like the sun. May the holders of the teaching live in harmony, and thus may all be auspicious for the teaching to endure. We pray for the good health of the teachers. We pray for their precious lives to be long. We pray for their activities to spread and increase. May we be blessed never to part from the teachers. I'm going to play the recording with Raji Ramanan chanting this. I hope the sound comes across okay.
आकाशस्य स्थितियावत् यावच्च जगतः स्थितिः तावन्मम स्थितिर्भूयात् जगद्दुःखानिनित्यम् आकाशस्य स्थितियावत् यावच्च जगतः स्थितिः तावन्मम स्थितिर्भूयात् जगद्दुःखानिनित्यः तावन्मम स्थितिर्भूयात् जगद्दुःखानिनित्यः तावन्मम स्थितिर्भूयात् जगद्दुःखानिनित्यः.
As long as space remains, as long as the world remains, may I too remain to alleviate the sufferings of the world. Okay, I hope the sound came across okay. Thank you all very much for joining us here tonight. And shall see you next week, or maybe before. Thank you.